Hello, and welcome to the second episode of the Frog in Hand Masterclass series in Pedagogy. My name is Jessica, and in this video, with the help of Rohan, Dhupar, and Erin Eldershaw, we will be helping you study the tools for teaching beginners and non-dancers. Let's begin. Section 1. What are the key elements needed to teach new movement? As a teacher, one must have the knowledge of the style vocabulary sequences and also the ability to impart that information to the students. In making dance technique interesting and accessible to beginners, there must be a strongly built scaffolded curriculum with the use of many analogies to help students simplify and relate to what is being taught. Here are some examples of explaining imagery from dance instructor and owner of Blue Heel Dance Studio, Caroline Augustin.
In my years of teaching, we've met people from all walks of life. And I've had to change my mode of instruction as I work with each student. For example, an engineer absorbs information very, very differently from a nurse or a social worker, for example. And I've had to use language that talks about right angles and movement on planes, and that seems to they understand that kind of language. I find, and maybe I'm jumping ahead a little bit, is to actually use imagery that again resonates with the student, not necessarily imagery that you think would work, but what would work for the student.
Before you start teaching, have a bit of a game plan, but also be ready to morph your ideas with your students with how they are feeling physically and emotionally.
In the previous episode, you learned that safety in all its forms is the #1 priority in any teaching and creative space. At the beginning of class, ask if any of your students have any injuries, and offer the space to talk to them in private if they wish.
To get you building a creative and training process, teach your students the techniques and the philosophy to do them safely, aesthetically, and effectively. There's repetitive use of technique to get good at something so you won't forget the nuts and the bolts. Internalizing the philosophy of what is done and not just a physical understanding, you can rediscover how to learn effectively. Even as a student who is a beginner and newly trained, you can contribute significantly in the process. Here is Daniel Levinson, Artistic Director of Ray Briowitz Studios, who will explain that even adequately trained beginners can contribute significantly in the artistic and training process.
There's an absolutism or almost an elitism in your physical capability to be at that level, whereas you can be adequate at what we do and be a profoundly exciting performer.
In learning technique as a beginner, remember the elements of dance. The elements of dance are the foundational concepts and vocabulary to help students develop movement skills and understand dance as an artistic practice. The acronym BAST or BURST helps students remember the elements of dance. Body, action or relationship, space, time, and energy. These elements help demonstrate any kind of movement. While different dance styles seek specialized skills and stylization choices, these 5 elements of dance are viable for all dance experiences. When teaching beginners as young as, for example, 5 years old, they don't necessarily need technique-based training, but they would also need imagination-based training. Use action verbs and games to get the simple basics, skills, and progressions across. Make techniques accessible and fun that will still promote physical embodiment and understanding of a technical vocabulary. You could divide and group students up to collaborate with one another and then come back together as a large group. In the learning process, get your students to collaborate with one another. You could also give them tasks with how they would teach or what the challenges of the project would be. Here's a task and exercise you can try. First, find a phrase of choreography that is moderately simple. Next, here are steps from dance educator Jill Hollingsworth on how to teach choreography to students.
You want to go over some basics, like if it were square dancing, then you'd have to know what a a do is, or a pass to the right. You go through those things so that you set up a vocabulary and language, and then they feel smart too. The students feel smart that, oh, I know this. And does everybody know what a do is? Or I don't know, what is it, square dancing, line dancing, the same thing. The whole thing with teaching new young students is sequencing and memory work of the sequencing. It's very difficult for them if it's technique.
Section 2. Regressed Progress. Regressed progress could mean several things, such as the first steps, returning to your structural foundation basics, breaking habits, and how to combat creative blocks to progress in the process. Let's break it down. Here's Daniel Levinson again explaining on getting to the first steps and returning to your structural basics.
What I mean by that is, if you go and attempt to lift 100 pounds when you can't do it well, you will hate yourself and hurt yourself potentially. So start off with something that you feel is quite immediate and obvious that you want to discuss, and do your best in doing it in such a way that's not negatively judgmental and open to the discussion of how to approach it with the group and the individual. So start with your 2 pounds and then move up to 100 pounds. That's the first thing.
On breaking habits, risk is very important and extremely hard to do when one feels that they'll be punished for their risk, or that their risk isn't valuable or good enough. Being outside of your comfort zone and trying new things will help and allow you to mold yourself into new educational and creative avenues. Motivate students to push their boundaries. Guide them to their edge or their limit without unhealthily overworking. This inspires hard work while establishing trust.
On combating creative blocks to progress in the process, keep small changes to allow others to keep exploring the foundation of work and how it alters. And after giving a new idea, have students discuss what was observed, noticed, any challenges, what was easy, and their preferences. For instance, some students may like harder challenges because it helps them commit and it makes them feel like they are doing a lot of work. You may also set the same expectation for everyone to be doing the same work as each other. Encouragement should be consistent and equitable based on students' particular strengths and focuses.
When trying to steer the class in motion again, try peer mentoring. Of course, if no student has anything to say, let that flow into the next steps. Then, when your students start getting comfortable with your teaching methods, start suggesting things to explore in the exploration. Point out things to observe. So, as they are observing that and they get better, think about what are the things that went south. What are the things that they lost? Give them opportunities to be self-aware and notice others. Be sure to check out the next Pedagogy episode as we dive deep into the creative and training process.
As teachers in the process, it's easy to get bored and tired as we allow fatigue to creep into our day. This may be an advantage to give you a challenge to think about what to do for the day and be in the present. Do your best as an instructor. Ask yourself, are you changing what you are doing? Are you asking things of your students because you're bored and you want them to move on? What does one do when they need to continue? To regain a sense of what to do, walk around the room, look around, and look at everyone. Rather than standing beside someone, walk across the room and look at the students to get a sense of the room. As teachers, lift your students up and be aware of what they need and give them the space and the tools to help them learn. It means backing them up and allowing them to fail. Here's a task and exercise that you can try right now. 1. Offer the empty room. 2. Grab one chair. This is your anchor to be creative, and exercise to work on nuts, bolts of weapons, stage combat, movements, choreography, or even a written script. 3. To create a shared language to have others work on to internalizing and bettering their skills, remember the elements of dance burst: body, energy, action or relationship, space, and time. 4. Start a rune drawing exercise inspired by William Forsythe to physically describe an inanimate object. See the video link in the description for the example. 5. Ask your students to slightly tweak their exercise as it forces them to be here and now. For instance, you can ask your students to change the direction as a mental and physical brain challenge, or have them partner up with another student. For example, changing the left hand to the right hand every so often. 6. Expand the physicality of your movements. Start using your arms and legs to create a phrase of new movement. Start to get creative with it. Don't be afraid to get silly with it, and have fun. 7. Remember to walk around the room as the instructor. Look around and look at everyone. Rather than standing beside someone, walk across the room and look at the students to get a sense of the room and their physicality. Section 3. Meeting students where they're at. Meeting students where they're at is an exploration of the relational, pedagogical, and structural dimensions. Think about these 3 questions. How do we know where students are? What do we do once we know? Which strategies help us navigate systemic constraints?
As an instructor, educator, and teacher, you commit for a high achievement from your students. This could mean for college and career readiness, but also the daily work of responding to students' individual needs in a way that fosters optimal growth. Get to know your students, academically, cognitively, culturally, emotionally, linguistically, physically, and behaviorally.
Think about how to reconfigure our old systems and practices and paradigms. Placing the individual learner at the center of the learning process, what actually happens cognitively, neurologically, and developmentally as students learn, should be at the center of the pedagogical model. On meeting students where they're at, have a consistent discussion and follow-up with your students. Here is Caroline Augustin and Fight Director Kev McCurdy on meeting with your students.
The other thing about getting collaboration, it's always good to get a roundtable discussion, and we often do that too. Was we ask them, what their particular challenge was, on this part of the process or learning this step, and then you get feedback on which you then can elaborate on the process.
To go and be yourself and be confident in your ability. Be able to morph when you need to morph. Don't be rigid, bend. Listen to what they suggest, work with it, but you kind of do have a bit of a game plan so you can build some of their suggestions into the structure, but it doesn't overtake the structure.
Having a group ability to discuss challenges and how to get better at them is amazing, especially when there is a return to the work on what they have done before to point out their growth. Typically, in a large educational system, we move on and on. When using the exercises to make it more challenging, as discussed in the last section, in addition to discussions, it reaffirms the effort your students are putting in. It makes them feel that they are capable of success and growth.
As a student and even as an instructor, acknowledging your growth is an honest way to get to know yourself and learn. Reinforcing good morals is vital for success, especially in how you want to treat others with respect, honesty, and clarity.
So I think that it's now become, again, one of our major concepts, rigorous compassion. This is to the teachers out there. There's things that happen because we're humans. You might have a student that you're having challenges with, and or nothing to do with the class, right? That is altering your ability to be here, now, open, and immediate. And all I can say is do your best, right? So I guess what I want to say is, just as you would show compassion to your fellow shared artists, to your students, to your performers, do so for yourself as well, with the proviso, be better.
When teaching adults as beginners, help build their confidence. A social dance environment is a more comfortable setting as opposed to a competitive setting. Make it fun for your students. It puts them at ease right off the bat. Also understand what their motivation is in learning dance. Are they learning for fun, to reacquaint themselves with a long-lost hobby, to make connections? Allow yourself as a teacher to connect with your students, get to know them, and have fun in the process. Here's a task you can do to meet your students where they're at. 1. Gather all in a circle, typically at the end of a session or day. 2. Ask how they and their bodies are feeling in that moment. 3. Open the space to comments and concerns and questions by instructing them to raise their hands to have the floor to speak. 4. Their peers can jump in on their similar concerns and comments and responses by raising their hands as well. Make it a semi-casual roundtable. 5. Listen attentively, and take notes if you can after indicating you are listening while you are taking notes. 6. If you don't know how to respond in that moment, internally flag or write down that concern to follow up with them later when you have your response. 7. If there are no other comments or concerns, open your physical or digital door for your students to individually and privately speak with you. And that's it, all the tools for teaching beginners and non-dancers. Be sure to watch episode 1 on strength-based feedback by Erin and episode 3 on the creative versus training process by Rohan. Also check out the incredible videos from the Frog in Hand Summer Company on the Frog in Hand YouTube channel. Don't forget to hit the like button and comment below on what you think. Subscribe for more content and ring the bell for more notifications. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.